reached out to the office and nobody was available. And I got asked, and I said to the inspector, I said, it's because I'm Catholic, right? Something like that, right? And she wasn't in a good space, and she just kind of stared through me. And then I corrected after that. I really was honored, right, to come here and to share a little bit. And my intention is to give you some information about what we do, a little bit about maybe what my personal life is like, and hopefully one or two ideas that'll keep you safe, and maybe some humor. And ultimately, I think what Pastor Rob is talking about is building a relationship between first responders and the church, and that the church is there for first responders. So anybody remember the Haldimand Norfolk Regional Police? Obviously, that was here before. My coach officer was a regional guy, and when I came here, it was 2001, so we were Haldimand Norfolk OPP. We're all one office. Cayuga and Simcoe had two buildings, but one office. And I'm in my 23rd year now, just started. My beautiful wife, Natalie, is here with me, and our daughters, Lorelei and Clara. And I have an older daughter, Hazel, who's 15, and my mother-in-law, Irene. So I just wanted to introduce them, and obviously they are... They're a very important part of what happens at home, and obviously a lot of stuff that's experienced by first responders isn't just primarily, right? It's a lot of secondary effects as well, right? And even last night I started at 5 in Simcoe, and then luckily I got home at 4:10. But you know, a lot of times we're tired, right? So I appreciate all the support. I'm uncomfortable accepting praise, right? Being up here and as a first responder, I mean, we're part of the community, and I get just as much joy and fulfillment as about just anybody following my vocation, right? So I feel called to do this job, and sadly, not everybody I work with feels that way, but the reality is that that's the way I feel. And so, you know, like, I'm not comfortable with a lot of praise, but I'm here, and the reality is that honored to be here with you, and the reality is that there are so many people who are first responders, right? It's not limited to police and firefighters, although the firefighters, I do tease them sometimes. But, you know, it's amazing if you've ever had the chance to be at night when the fire call comes in, dispatcher goes off, and how many minutes it takes those guys to get out of bed and to be at the fire hall. The fire door opens, the trucks start, like, it is amazing. Like, probably, I don't know, 3 minutes, 2 minutes? I can't remember what the time is, but it is incredible. I mean, these guys aren't sleeping upstairs and sliding down the pole. They have lives, jobs, and it's really incredible what they do, and the amount of great things they do in our community for basically no money, right? I mean, it's all volunteer, that's the word, right? And they do it faithfully. Nurses, obviously there's a lot of nurses that are first responders. One lady brought in a glass of wine for somebody for New Year's Eve, and I never even thought of that, right? This past Christmas, I was sitting there New Year's Eve watching a patient, and she brought in a glass of wine and a beer to share with somebody who obviously wasn't going to be at home. The children's aid workers, correctional officers, and most importantly, Tim Hortons serving the coffee. The person that bakes the apple fritters, they're all important, right? And we're all part of this community. Yeah. It's a crazy world, right? And people are really hurting, right? I'm sure you get that message every week. I mean, there's a lot of hurting people. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? There's such a need for people to focus on service over self, and perhaps, you know, we have a nice congregation here. You never know, maybe somebody is thinking about a call to service in some way, right? You know, the craziness, teens and adults, and if you read the paper and you actually like have a heart when you're looking at this paper and looking at the news, right? It's teens that are doing a lot of these things, right, that are just horrible, right? And I don't know why it is, if they're being promised they're not getting any time, if that's what it is, or if it's just the families are coming, I don't know what it is. But the reality is they're doing horrible things. They're trafficking high-end vehicles, right? Mitch Marner's a victim of that, right? I don't know if they were teens that did that, but the reality is that Mitch is driving there, they pull up right in front of him, they have guns, get out of the car, right? We want your phone, and then they toss the phone and take the car, and then there's a whole organized network, right? Presumably of adults that help them, right? They're trafficking girls, right? Girls that go missing in our communities, they're trafficking them. They're going up to communities all over, not Toronto, small towns, right? They're trafficking them, and girls are working off debt and things like that, and whatever they're supposed to do for a video game or for food, or the love that they never got from their family. They're kidnapping, they're stabbing with knives, they're shooting each other with guns. And yet, with the whispers of hopelessness, anything can be made new, right? I mean, that's our faith, right? And I'm proof of that right here. I mean, I didn't end up in jail when I was a kid, but the reality is I didn't have the confidence to talk in front of people or to share anything, or felt I had anything to give. So here we are, and you know, we're all vulnerable to the voices that tell us that we're not good enough, and not lovable enough, and not strong enough, not big enough. I mean, that was me, right? So I'm proof here in front of you that anything can be made new. And until recently, I spent my whole career working in Simcoe in Norfolk County, and I love it there. I lived there. I lived in Simcoe, near Lindell Heights, near Calvary Church, and I absolutely love it. But I did feel a call a couple months ago, so after Greg Pierschel was killed, to reach out to Haldimand and offer to come for 2 months. So I approached my wife, made sure it was okay at home, right? Obviously it's a sacrifice because we got Laura Elias, who was just born in January. But I really felt it was important because I just feel there's been so many bad things that have happened in Haldimand to this office that they need help, right? And so I look at the Ontario Police College motto, and I'm not going to yell it, but the reality is it's integrity, knowledge, and courage, right? So that's what these officers that died, that's what they were thinking about. They were practicing the police challenge. Police don't move, right? Fight as you train, train as you fight, right? Losing is not an option. I mean, that's a lot of times in society what we're told, right? If you don't have money, you're not good enough. If you don't fix up your house, or you don't go on this vacation, you're not good enough, right? Same thing with this, right? Losing is not an option. You're always going to go home, right? But how do we reconcile that as an officer, as a human, when the reality is that our brother isn't going to go home, or there's a chance that we might not go home, right? Or we're not going to go in the same way, right? With a brain injury or whatever. So how does a young officer apply a tourniquet, do chest compressions on their brother, right? So that's the reality of some of these situations, right? Without giving too much detail, you know, how did they do that with somebody they were just having coffee with? They spend more time with these people than their family and friends, right? So if they're spending 12 hours with them at work, the reality is that they're more family than their own family in many ways, right? And how such a wonderful person who strived to be the best physically, mentally, and spiritually was taken, right? That doesn't make sense to them, right? How does God allow that to happen? These are the questions, right? And so you have to reconcile that. Obviously, I come with a little bit different view. It's a call to vulnerability, right? If we're called to love, we're called to vulnerability, right? And I'm sure Pastor talks about that, right? How if you love somebody, you give them your heart, they can break it, right? And the same thing with this job. There's no guarantees, right? And we're all born naked, we'll all die naked. And like Denzel said it best, you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse, right? We're not going to take anything with us. This is all we have, right? And in the middle, we're all vulnerable to this risk, right? Whether a police officer, or you're working in a bank, or you're a teacher in a school, and you're watching the news and you're worried about this stuff. So what I bring to Haldimand maybe is some reassurance that a pen or a body-worn camera is mightier than the sword. So I've seen that a few times in my life, right, where the horrible things have happened and the pen has come out ahead, right? And so I even got a chance to meet Hagersville's own Calgary Sergeant Andrew Harnett. So some of you may know him, and we're blessed to meet him and know a bit of his story. So in 2001 or 2002, Krista Shaws, who's also from Haldimand County, introduced me to him, and we went to Springvale. So Springvale, the guy was robbed, owned the general store, and I played the old man who owned the general store, and Andrew beat me up and dragged me out of bed and so on. And we became friends. And this was for a Crime Stoppers reenactment for CHTV. And so anyway, that's how we met. And he did ride-alongs with me, which probably was crazy at the time because he wasn't an auxiliary. And if he would have got hurt, again, with policing, everything is liability, right? And I would have been responsible. But he had such a joy and a passion, and was so eager to learn and wanted to be a police officer so bad that I couldn't turn him down. And in 2004, when he asked me to write him a reference to apply for military police, I was honored to do that. When he died New Year's Eve 2 years ago in Calgary on a traffic stop, I was always trying to find a way to honor him. And I couldn't, I polished my boots a little bit more, and I told people about Andrew's life of service, but I couldn't really come up with a precise way. And maybe coming to Haldimand to help, maybe this is part of it, I don't know. But it certainly seems right. by the end of 2022, when Greg Purcell, officer, was murdered, I found myself in a position where I loved my job, but I wasn't making a difference. So I felt God calling me, obviously, to come here to Haldeman for whatever reason, as scary as that can be. Like Andrew, Greg was too passionate and driven about a life of service, right? That's what they had in common. And I began to reflect on the officers of Haldeman and the more difficult issues they're dealing with, like morale, right? Low staffing numbers, young officers who don't stay, right? They've tried coaching them in other places, right? Like in Norfolk, and is the Norfolk officer going to coach that officer the same as they would if they were going to stay in Haldeman, right? And these people were being poisoned perhaps, right? A lot of these different things, right? And of course we all have workplaces where there are issues. There's bullies, there's people who don't put 100%, and if they see the leaders doing that, then they follow that, right? So I felt called to come here as a senior person. I'm probably the most senior person on the road with 23 years now. So I feel blessed to grow up in a town of 1,000, Eastern Ontario, where people knew each other, and yet there was lessons that I wouldn't have chosen, right? Some of the terrible things that happened. So I can bring that to Haldeman, is that a 16-year-old friend of mine was murdered with a rock, right? And I made fried chicken, and the lady was murdered that I made fried chicken with next to my dad's barbershop. And we had an active shooter a couple of years ago where one of the women used to serve me at the Wilno Tavern. So, and then of course that guy, you know, like just getting to the evil that we see, he slept in the cruiser like a baby after he was arrested. The officer that made the arrest, he's now working in Haldeman, and he shared that with me, right? And so these are the kinds of people, the evil that lurks, right? And so it's important to be, to have faith and to be grounded, yeah, and to have hope, right? Sure. That's good. So it's hard, right? But policing is fun, and I want to share that with you. So about 10 years ago, a stepfather had fathered a child with an elementary school girl who was his daughter. Okay, so these are another one of the terrible things that we deal with, somebody that ended up having a child by their stepfather, right? Terrible. And they were in grade school themselves, they were very, very young, right? And then about 2 years later, after he was out on jail, he had done another offense in relation to the same child. And he was wanted, so I had this informant that was trying to tell me, you know, because he was living at the Norfolk Hotel that was still around, you know, when he's going to be out and this and that, and it didn't work out. Well, I'm at the Norfolk County Fair with my daughter, who's probably 7 at the time-ish, 6, 7, Norfolk County Fair Day, Young Canada Day, and we're heading towards the game section, and like a Father of the Year would do, and I was the man in the bright yellow coat, right? Like, I mean, there was no way you didn't see me, right? People were joking about it because it had rained that day. And who comes right towards me in a group of maybe five different people, right, is him. And of course I recognize him and then turn, right? So I have to follow him, right? And he didn't even see me in the yellow coat. And as I got my daughter by the hand, and then we start walking, and she's like, Daddy, 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 the ducks, you know, this and that, right? And so I make a phone call, call my friend who I'd just seen, right? I said, this guy's wanted a sex assault, you know, and you know, we need to get him, right? Where is he? We're over here. And I said, well, that's perfect. That's where we're going, right? And so they ended up arresting him, and it was perfect, right? But these other things, right? I can't turn it off, and yet there's also these things that are, they happen for whatever reason, right? And the blessing that it was. And I don't know, just a nice memory for me. About 7 years ago, I investigated a crash where a woman, her husband was killed in front of her in a crash, and he was always teased that his shoes were too tight, he's never going to get them off. And he's a Leaf fan, so he's probably smiling today. I didn't think of that. So anyway, he's always teased that his shoes are too tight, they're never going to come off, right? And he was walking for his daughter's wedding to get in shape, and they were about 1 kilometer from their house and so on. It's just, you know, I'm sure you've heard many stories like it. And I got there, and her face was covered like Kool-Aid, like just like blood, like just red from giving him CPR. And I thought, you know what, that lady loved that man, right? Like that, they were a happy couple. Because sometimes, sadly, I go to houses where somebody's died, and you can feel that they're relieved, they're happy. Sometimes the kids are even mad at the other spouse for being happy, you know, and it's crazy, but families are torn apart. But this one that was together, it was nice to see, and we became friends. One fall I was raking leaves, and the Domino's pizza car came up, and my neighbor, who's an officer, used to get Domino's all the time. And I thought, well, obviously they got the wrong address, right? And they said, oh, are you Barry? And I'm like, yeah, I'm Barry. Like, we got Domino's for you. I'm like, well, I didn't order any pizza. And, but she had ordered pizza, right? And so now that we've had a loss in our family, we had a stillborn, this lady has supported my wife through that experience, right? So you don't realize sometimes how the pen, how the heart, how God works, right? And how that situation has been made new. Another example of it. So issues facing policing is the fentanyl crisis. You hear about it every day. I'm not sure it's a fentanyl crisis, but rather people that are indifferent, whether they live or die. That's to me the hope, right? And like if I said to you, I hope, let's go do some fentanyl, there's a chance that we might die, that you would say, hey, that's crazy, I don't want to do that. Like, life is good, I got to be there for my family, I have responsibilities, right? And people are dying, 16-year-olds I don't recognize, who I dealt with 2 years before, who look 21. It's, men, women, and children are dying from this drug, right, without hope. Marijuana is a drug, it's still a drug, and it's legal now, and people seem to think that it's okay. Mental health issues are coming up, with that. Other drugs that will likely become illegal, right, soon, and whether they'll be more accessible, I don't know. Bail reform is another issue that the commissioner is very passionate about after Greg's death, right? So obviously that's a sensitive issue, and it's even come up recently. I actually shouldn't talk about it, but bail reform is another sensitive thing. Not all officers are created equal, and we know that, right? So that's a challenge in policing. Some are motivated by power, right? We see this in the States. We always thought officers were murdering people, and now we can see it, right, on TV. And, some of them are motivated by power, and we work with them, right? We've all have people that we work with that are not the best people. Policing is not different from that. And the weeds and the wheat, they have to grow together. It's unfortunate, but that's also what makes it beautiful too. And there are some that make poor choices. Black Lives Matter, obviously they have some legitimate concerns, and they're obviously difficult too, because people are watching these things and then they're making assumptions, right? That Officer Yanta and Cayuga is the same guy. He's stopping me because I'm black, right? Or he's stopping me because I'm this, right? And it's we also have to wear that too. Changing technology is very, very good for many ways, because people are grabbing cell phone pictures of suspects, and maybe suspects are less interested in doing crime if they know they're on video. But the reality is then there's the responsibility of producing all the information for court, and how we do that and the amount of time that takes. We don't have the magic way to, just say, okay, I want this to go over here. It has to be done. And officers have to learn that, and not all our officers are interested in being up to date in technology, or that's not one of the skills they thought they'd have to come up with. There are positives too. Obviously, the body-worn camera has solved, at least led to charges and some convictions for Andrew and Greg's case, right? The body-worn camera. So that's, to me, that's the pen. And even the officer that was killed in York, I remember about 6 months after he died, he was under a vehicle where he had put his hand in to the car, reached in, and then the van took off. And then he was, they had a name it started with S. But anyway, after about 6 months after he died, I had to request a report on a domestic violence situation, and he had written the report. And it's just another example of things the little ripples that live on, right? So PTSD obviously is an issue, and like staffing, right? So if officers need to go off, then obviously people need to cover them, right? And that's not necessarily wrong, but it is a challenge. And then unfortunately with PTSD, now that we've opened the door, not everybody is going to respect what that means, right? Some people are going to take advantage of it. So unironically at Greg's wedding, I met a guy who's working in Professional Standards Bureau, which is internal affairs, right? And so it's cool. And he says, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing PTSD. And I said, yeah, that's tough. That's hard to investigate. How do you tell somebody that they're not sick, right? Or they're not wounded, right? He said, no. We're getting people working. So they're double dipping, right? They're fixing up basements and working for their partners, and then collecting the same police money, right? So that's something that is going to be an issue for a little bit to come. Kevin Gilmartin talks about PTSD and emotional survivor. So one thing that I notice about myself, and I've shared with my wife, is we went out on one of our first dates, and I picked the one table at the Barrel. Everybody been to the Barrel in Simcoe? Italian Greek food, because I like to overlook the whole restaurant, right? If I can't sit with my back to my wall, I don't want anybody behind me, right? Because I'm an officer. That's the way we are. Tim Hortons, we're always turning. right? Like this, you see, especially the rookie, right? You see this, right? You notice it, right? That's the way we are, right? And we can't change that. You know, we're messed up, right? Everything is crap, right? If you deal with your colleagues a lot of times, you know, like it's all crap. This person, oh, they're not going to change it. Why don't they just go and do themselves in, right? Lack of hope, right? Everything's no good, and constant risk, right? If I arrest this guy and bring him in, he could get hurt in the cell, or if I let him go home to his wife, he might hurt his wife. Or if I get a guy that goes unconscious in the cells, do I wait for the ambulance, who's 20 minutes or 10 minutes, or do I just throw him in the car and he dies on the way to the hospital, and then I'm responsible for that? These are the things that we're always weighing, right? So what do we do when we get home? Nothing. Yeah. You don't want, the wife wants to know what you want for dinner. I don't know, whatever, just anything, something, nothing. So that's the way it is, and I patrol at home. So you know, I like to go a different route every time when I'm coming back home or going out somewhere, and I'm watching, right, every intersection, turn this way and that way, because that's the way my coach trained me, right? And you can't turn it off. Meat at dinner, any kind of food, and firemen, you could probably relate to this too, that a lot of times there's no food really that doesn't remind you of a scene, right? Of somebody that's passed. And it's, you know, it's just part of your, part of what you have to deal with, right? Solutions, I think one of the solutions is socializing outside policing. So that's one gift that I feel like I encourage people to have, is have contacts outside, like Pastor Rob, or, you know, or somebody in a different profession, right? I had a friend that was a priest who recently died of a car accident after cancer, and you know, he was such a good support for me because he was in a different field and we didn't complain, right? We talked about different things and it was fresh. Policing concerns, obviously active shooters every day nearly in the States, right? Columbine is one of the first that I remember. Nova Scotia, obviously, so if you think it's just in Canada, it's Nova Scotia, right? And even before Nova Scotia, this guy in my home area will know, Basil Barutsky took the car of the first victim, went to the next house, took the car, went to the next house, took the car, and then he went to Ottawa and was arrested, right? And fell asleep like a baby because he had done what he wanted to do, right? The point is that these people are, there's a lot of wounded people, right? And one thing that we have in common, which I just remembered I didn't put in, is I went to this threat assessment seminar where like the FBI was up in Orillia and they were talking about it. He says, you know, they don't have everything in common. Some of them hate women, some of them hate this, some of them hate that. But the reality is they're all isolated. They all isolate themselves, right? And how maybe a cup of coffee or a contact might pick something up, right? Might change the trajectory, right? So that's for everybody, right? We're all part and parcel of that. Sometimes you don't want to go down the same hole as them, right? You have to be careful because a lot of these people are not safe to hang out with, but the reality is that they need that. And that's why we carry the C8 in the car, which is basically like an automatic type, it's semi-automatic, but it looks like a war rifle, right? And we carry that every day, it's mandatory. And yeah, that's part of what we do. There's a lot of division in society. Obviously, we have that in the office with COVID, right? Everybody knew what the right thing to do was. How many people should be in the gym at a time, whether they should be allowed to be unvaccinated and be in the gym. And everybody knew how to solve it, right? And so that's another thing that's in society that we see, right? There's a person in leadership in the office in Haldimand that said to me, we don't actually help at all. We don't do anything. We don't actually help. And I'm thinking that's sad that that person is in a position of leadership. And what do I do with that, right? I mean, I guess I pray about it, and I try and do my thing. But I mean, that's the opposite of what I feel, right? And then if he's got 6, 7, 8 people under him who are young, what are they going to think, right? And it's sad. We have a large number of inexperienced officers. Volunteerism maybe is not as you know, like. You know, not everybody's putting their hand up for things, right? Because they know that they're busy enough as it is. Short-staffed, we lost their partner. Where's the hope? Racism even, you know, I mean, the reality is that it's in the States, but there's also, you know, issues here too. Anyway, there are people, and some people don't even know how to treat a lady. I mean, officers that you think would know about sexual harassment and know about sexual assault and know about these things, right? And then and everybody's type A, right? We all know how to fix everything. It creates conflict sometimes. Anyone want to know what my least favorite call is? Yeah. So somebody that's exposed their penis online, like and then they're, well, what do I do, officer? You know, like I'm being extorted. You know, they want $1,000. They taken a picture of all my contacts. So basically, you have a girl that they don't know that showed up on their contacts, like maybe 24 hours ago, 12 hours ago, 6 hours, I don't know, right? They look good, right? It's a nice person in a dress, whatever, right? They're not naked. Send me a nude. Okay, I like my nude, right? So they take a picture of their genitalia, right, and send it off, and then of course, then boom, the phone locks, and you get a picture of all the contacts and their junk, right? And which God says that stuff is a gift, right? Your body, temple, this and that, right? And they just, obviously, the phone has made them in such a way that they don't think. Yeah. Like, would they do that in a hospital if they saw a nice looking lady walking down the hall? They just said, well, I mean, there is some people that would do that, but the most is that these married men and 17-year-old boys would not do that. So then you have to have a conversation with them about maturity and about, like respecting their body. Like that's my least, because you can't fix it. Yeah. Like how are you gonna, then well, should I send the money? I'll just stall them and this and that. But the reality is that it's not gonna stop, right? They're gonna want more money, and you're gonna have to admit that your mom is gonna get the picture of your junk, right? And you should have known better, right? And by the time I do the search warrant, that's a year down the road. This is what happens, right? But you wish you could be there with people when they get the phone to make sure that they don't take it into their room in private, and that they know that there's risks involved, that it's not just everybody's your friend. So cell phones, Pastor Rob suggested maybe some advice on cell phones. So they're wonderful things, right? I mean, they're getting a lot of evidence. People have creepy people around their house, let's say, looking in their window, you get a picture of the guy, that's perfect, right? Or the cams in the car where they're getting in traffic, people are driving aggressively, that's great too. They take a picture now, I can magnify it so I can actually read something, because my eyes are going. That's good. I could reach out to someone that comes to mind, right? That's perfect. Sometimes it doesn't take, sometimes you just don't think about that, right? As soon as somebody comes to mind, why not just send them a text, hey buddy, I'm thinking about you, or hey, I'm praying for you, or whatever, right? And it's not rocket science, but sometimes we get so caught up in our own swiping, right? Yeah. That you just forget about this common sense stuff. They're trackable. So that's great, right? If you have somebody with Alzheimer's, we can go and find them. That's great, right? But my 15-year-old's on Snapchat, she's going with everybody to the park, right? Is that right? Just because that Snapchat can do that, is that really a good thing, right? So basically you're letting strangers into the park with your child, right? Or into their bedroom if they have the phone in the bedroom. Never let your child take the phone in the bedroom, ever, even if they beg you, because the reality is that, I think of this 11-year-old Amanda Todd, I'm pretty sure she was 11 with the phone in her own room. I'm not saying that's the only reason, I'm not blaming her parents, but the reality is that if she didn't have the phone in the room by herself, she wouldn't have exposed herself to that first stranger who ended up, that's how everything just kind of one led to another, right? And then you see her suicide, you probably remember the girl with the black and white cards where she had written in handwriting. Yeah. Just because you have a contact and they have a contact, they're not your friend. It's common sense, right? You would know that if you're talking, like, just because Pastor Rob is friends with somebody in the band, I don't know the guy, right? Like, he looks nice, but I don't know him. Like really, but people, they think as soon as, like my daughter talks like that, well, it's my friend, right? Well, what do you mean it's your friend? Well, it's a contact of a contact. And they can be detrimental for seniors. Obviously, seniors, they don't want to tell their kids because they don't want to seem stupid, right? Or they've got in a little bit and they don't want their children to be mad at them. They're tired of getting reprimanded, and they think, my kid is always telling me, get on the phone, do this, right? And then next thing you know, they're part of a big business plan where they've sent, in Delhi, 800,000. Wow. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy how much money people are sending in for love. They've never met the person. And they want it so bad, they're so lonely, they're so broken, they're sending 30, 40, 50, 100,000, $300,000 for love, right? To somebody they've never met, who wants to get to see you, but just can't. So that's another one of my least favorite calls. Road safety, he wanted me to talk about that. Obviously don't drink and drive, right? So many people are broken. We had a guy this weekend, $80,000 truck, he didn't crash it, but he came from Stony Creek, was drywalling with his kid. I effed up. He was so drunk, that's pretty much all he could say. I effed up, right? And another guy, recently. Anyway, one guy was gay, and he had been holding in a secret relationship for 50 years, right, at work, and his wife finally had caught him. So these kinds of things, there's a lot of broken people coming in the breath room, right? They're not drinking and driving because they're on top of the world. Something's going wrong, right? And so these are the people that I meet. I've met over 320 of them now. But just if you're going down, get help. Don't take it out on the road. And so how many times have you been in Walmart and somebody drunk in front of you has cut you off with a cart? Very rarely, right? Probably can't even remember the last time. When was the last time somebody on the cell phone just stopped right in front of you in the Walmart, right? Or in the grocery store? Or was talking and just rude in a restaurant with the phone. People lose their judgment when you have the phone. Don't drive with the phone. Like if drinking and driving is bad, the phone, it just seems to be so much worse, right? So, yeah. Closing, unless there's any questions, which I'm sure I've talked long enough, but you can welcome me back again if you wish. I'm available. If you want Pastor Rob to connect with me, I can do that too. So closing, I had the opportunity to write Andrew's reference letter. So when he approached me, he says, Andrew Harnett from Hagersville. You know Andrew Harnett Park. There's a little park there with a pool. Maybe you go to. He asked me to do his reference letter. So I'll just read that to you because I'm not a hoarder, but I like to keep things, and I don't know why I kept it, but I did. And so I didn't have any difficulty going through my system of disorganization. My wife is very organized, all over the place, and I'm disorganized. My kitchen table is usually a disaster, and then when people come over, I move things to the bed. My mother-in-law can attest to this. And then when they leave, okay, it's safe, I move it back to the table, right? But then everything gets kind of moved in a different order. It's a little different. Some things are damaged, coffee spilled, but I've been able to save this. So what I wrote is Andrew is mature beyond. So this was 22nd October 2004. Handwritten on paper, you don't see that every day. So Andrew is mature beyond his years, demonstrated in the company he keeps, the way he carries himself, and in his worldview. Andrew is a candidate that will work with pride, treat all with respect, and be a leader by example wherever he is. Given the body of knowledge, training, and trust of his colleagues and superiors, Andrew will shine from the starting block. He will be a reliable investment and a member for years to come. I recommend him as very worthy of your attention. And so I hope that when I'm called to my final resting place, that God, my family, and colleagues will find that I was a reliable investment, as Andrew and Greg were. So I thank you very much for your time, and again, we're here for you, and we're just part of this community. Amen.
So we said in the email 5 to 7 minutes. So, but very seriously, thank you. I'm just sitting there and thinking, this is tough stuff to hear. I think it was so great for you to say it publicly, and I think it was really important for us to hear that. Right? It was really important for us to hear that. I really feel like part of this day was just kind of getting an understanding, because you can appreciate, you go, okay, great job, but until you kind of get an appreciation for what emergency services do every day, and like he says, can't turn it off and stuff. I just am so thankful that we are doing this so we can empathize properly. This week was a little bit fraught with, I was a little bit anxious coming into First Responders, because I wanted to bring sort of a bit of a spiritual voice toward the end of this. That wasn't me. I'm going to do that in just a second. But I wanted to bring someone who had care, somebody who had walked the road with some officers, some firefighters, some EMS, somebody who knew what it was like to be there. And I got an email on Thursday that the person that I had scheduled had some health issues and couldn't be here. And I was like, no! And so all day Friday, Pastor Scott can attest to this, I was burning the phone lines down, calling everybody I knew, emailing everybody I knew. And I thought, what are the chances? Because it's just a busy weekend. It's short notice. These people are busy. Some people don't want to come. And long story short, I'm so thankful for the connection that was made with Vic Gayed. And Vic, lo and behold, I thought we were going to have to, I called the guy in Peterborough. I'm like, bro, can you help me? I know this guy. He's a chaplain for the Peterborough Police Force. I said, could you just help me out? Like, just do me. I will pay you. I don't know what it, like, so... Yeah, anyways. Vic came from Simcoe. Yeah. I should not have said that. And lo and behold, Vic is from Simcoe and has a fantastic story. And so, Vic, why don't you come and let's welcome him. Vic, Henry, can you just take the volume down a little bit here? Thank you so much. Great.
Well, good morning. It is a privilege to be here and share with you this morning. As been said from Pastor Rob, my name is Vic Gayed. I grew up in Delhi, not too far away, but have been just moved back to the community 3 years ago. Just a little bit of background on myself. For 25 years, I was in pastoral ministries in the church, and I finished up in the Lindsay area about 5 years ago. And at that time, a friend of mine, I was out for coffee, and he asked me if I've considered corrections. And I said, corrections, they're looking for a chaplain. And so, long story short, I got hired on at Central East Correctional Center, which is a maximum security jail in Lindsay. And it's an adult institution. There's anywhere from 800 to 1,200 inmates. And so for a year and a half, I served there as a chaplain. And then there was an opportunity for me to move and back home to this area. And so for the last 3 years, I've been at the Sprucedale Youth Center as a chaplain with the youth there, 13 to 18-year-old kids, that some of the things, you just got to shake your head at. And some of them are there for murder, for gun charges, drugs, all sorts of things. But one thing I can say is that there is hope for them. And that's what we were able to do there at Sprucedale. They can get an education, they can get trades programs, and we're trying to get them. In adult, I didn't see that so much, and that's why I was so glad that I had that opportunity to finish my career there in Sprucedale. I say that because on Friday I just retired But I'm not retiring from ministry. I had an interview a couple weeks ago with the OPP, and looking at the opportunity in this area of being able to be a chaplain for the OPP. And I'm very much looking forward to that opportunity. When I was in the city of Kawartha Lakes, hence my uniform, I was the chaplain there for 5 years with the police, fire, and EMS. What an opportunity. I had no idea what I was getting into after being in the church world and then all of a sudden stepping into a first responders world. My first ride along with a police officer, I'll never forget it. She was close to the end of her career. She was in her early 50s. She started her career in Toronto with Toronto Police Service. And she soon found out that Toronto was not the place for her and that she wanted to transfer. And she had some traumatic experiences there. And so she got hired on with the city of Kawartha Lakes. Our first ride on, I only knew her by her first name, and I'll say it's Kathy, but I'll make it up. And we were driving along, and we just got to know each other. It was my first week there. And really, chaplaincy is about a ministry of presence. It's just about building relationships with our first responders and just being able to say, hey, you know what, I'm a safe place. If you need to talk, please come and talk to me. Yeah. And anyway, we're not even 15 minutes down the road. I just asked her a couple questions about some of her experiences. And we had to pull over the cruiser because tears started streaming down her face. And she said, I struggle and live with PTSD, and nobody understands what I go through. This is within 15 minutes of just knowing her. I didn't even know her last name. But because I was in her office, I was in her cruiser, I was in her safe place, she was able to take that wall down a little bit and share, because there was someone there that it wasn't her boss, it wasn't her sergeant, it wasn't her chief. it was someone that she could share with. And that's what chaplaincy is about. It's about loving and caring for our first responders for where they're at, and being able to accept them and to love them for what they're going through. Because they are our heroes. They are our heroes. They're the ones running in when everyone else is running out. I had another incident, and it wasn't too far after that. I had the chief come to me and say, we have one of our members. He's going through something, but he's not talking to anybody. And this guy is a very dedicated officer. He has a strong military background. So you can tell something about his demeanor, his commitment, and job first, everything else second. He said he's on duty today with his platoon, and right now he's doing some paperwork, sitting somewhere. Do you mind going over there, introducing yourself, and just having a chat, trying to find out how he's doing? Okay, this was very unique to me. So went over, sat down and talked with him. We invited me into the cruiser. The chief radioed ahead and let him know that I was coming. So we're sitting in there having a coffee. Always bring a cup of coffee when you're going to meet him. That always goes over really well. And as we're talking, I asked him some questions regarding family and things. And he just opened up again very quickly. He just shared because, again, he wouldn't say it to the chief or his platoon or anyone else. But he was able to share with me about how he's struggling with his family. His teenage son has suicidal ideologies, and he doesn't know what to do. But yet he wouldn't take time off work. He wouldn't, because he was so committed. He had that, I'm tough, I gotta go through this. And we sat for 2 hours. And just being able to share and talk about family, the importance, and him as a man, and him as a father, about what's your first responsibility? Is it your job or is it your family? And he realized that it was his family. We were able to drive back to the station. We went into the chief's office, and he was able to take time off and get some help. And I'm thankful to say that they went through counseling. His father went with the son every counseling session together, and that's a happy story. But these are the pressures that our first responders go through that we don't even know about sometimes. Well, we don't know about them until you get to hear them. With the fire department, I was part of the peer support team, and there was myself and a medical doctor from the local hospital who had a psychology degree. We were the only two outsiders that were part of the peer support. Everyone else was either EMS, fire, or police. And being volunteer fire department, that it was up in the city of Kawartha Lakes, a lot of them are. A lot of bushfires, a lot of not so much what you'd see in the city. And there was a one call, and it was an arson, and it was in a group home, and there was loss of life. And it was very, very tragic, very tragic. And I remember the next day, within 24, I was trained in critical incident stress management with CISM, and it's a volunteer thing that after you go through a bad call, we encourage as many to come and sit down and let's talk this through. And not about what happened, what was right, wrong, but how are you handling this? What are you taking home with you? Here are some steps. I remember sitting in that circle with 20 firefighters, tough guys, going around sharing about what they saw, a Kleenex box in the middle, and it was empty by the end of our session. And I looked, this young man at the very end finished off. I'll never forget, he was about 22 years old, and he said, I couldn't handle what I saw. I couldn't think, because my real job, I work in a casket building company in town, and as all I can think of is on Monday I'm going to be building this guy's casket. Wow. And that's the stress. That's the tough part of the job. Yeah. We as regular people don't understand that. And that's the part where we need to say, we love you. We want to help you. We want to support you. We want to do what we can. In our society, there's been so many changes with COVID, so many extra stresses for our first responders. After I left Kawartha Lakes and I moved here to Simcoe, about a year and a half after, I was just figuring out the day. It's been a year and a half, and I got a call from my chief, my former chief, and he said, "Vic, I got some bad news. So-and-so took his own life, and he was a police officer, and he was a good friend, and I did ride-alongs with him, and he was a happy-go-lucky guy. He had a beautiful wife, a wonderful marriage, and he had a 10-year-old girl. And yet it wasn't about the marriage. It wasn't like his wife talked to me endlessly and saying, I said, did you see any signs? Was there, anything in your marriage? Was he taking home stuff? Were you guys able to talk?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Our marriage was beautiful." And it was the stress, the mental health stress of COVID and other things that were happening in the community with the drug use and everything else, and he was just taking it and didn't have an outlet. And it was so sad.
Yeah.
Those are the unsung heroes. Those are the stories that we don't always hear about.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that we need to be praying about. What are some things that you can do as a congregation? What are some things that you can do? I was even thinking, on my way here, sometimes I'll see an officer sitting on the side of the road or radar, or they're doing paperwork in a warehouse parking lot or something. And I've done this once before, and I kind of pull up and they're suspicious. But I just rolled down my window and I said, "Thank you for your service." And the guy's like, "What?" I'm like, "No, thank you. Thank you for what you do for taking care of us."
Good.
That's one thing that you can do, very practical.
Yeah.
We talked about giving out. When you're in Tim Hortons line, someone buys you a coffee and you're paying it forward. Pay it forward with a first responder. Next time you're driving by the fire hall and you see the guys out there checking your equipment, washing the trucks, pull in and just go, "Thank you for your service."
Yeah.
That goes a long way.
Yeah.
Our EMS, they have the highest PTSD rate in all of our services for first responders, because every call is a traumatic call.
Yeah.
Every call, and it's life and death, many times. We need to thank them. Sometimes they're at their break, they're grabbing lunch, they're sitting in a parking lot, you see the ambulance. Thank them. Give them a Tim's card. Say, "Hey, thank you for your service." Little things like that go such a big way. Just some practical ways that we can do. So that's my encouragement to you as a congregation. There are some very practical things. We have lots of first responders here today. There's others that you will see in your community on a regular basis. I encourage you, I challenge you to do that. At this point, I am just going to ask, if you are a first responder, to please stand. Just stand for a minute. Okay, congregation, I want you to look around, and I just want you to put your hands together, and I want you to thank them. Thank you for your service. And I want to challenge you ladies and gentlemen that are here today that are first responders. If there's anything that you're going through, and I know it's been tragic here in this area in the last little while, please reach out. There are more supports there nowadays than there has been in the past. And I know they're training it at the police college about dealing with your feelings and being able to talk about supports, not to keep things in. If there's anything I can do, talk to somebody, talk to Pastor Rob. Come up to me after and say, "Hey, can we grab a coffee?" I'd love it. Please reach out and help, and thank you for your service. You may be seated, and I'm going to ask the congregation to stand up. As a church, I want you to look around at these heroes, and we're just going to pray. And we're going to ask for a blessing upon them. And I hope that you will be able to, not just today, but the rest of the 364 days in our year, to be able to thank them for their service and to be able to appreciate them.
Yeah.
So let's pray for our first responders. Heavenly Father, I just thank you again for this morning. I thank you for this time together.
Yes, God.
I thank you for this church, for their heart, for wanting to appreciate our local heroes in fire and EMS and policing. Lord, you know the hard work that they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know the trauma that they go through.
Mm-hmm.
And some things are just unimaginable in our lives that we can hear the stories of what they go through. And yet expected to keep on a brave face each day. So Lord, I pray a blessing upon them. I pray a blessing on their families,
Yes, Lord.
on their husbands, their wives, their children, who often take a lot of the brunt home of what's happening in their world. And so I pray, God, that you will give them encouragement, that they would come to know you and some way of understanding peace that you provide in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we thank you again for the celebration. And as a church, I pray that in this community, you can be a lighthouse for our first responders.
Yeah.
That you would be able to make a difference, not only today, but that you will step out of your comfort zone to thank them. And if you really do appreciate what they do each day, do it with deed, not just word. And I pray, God, that we would be able to, as a community, bless Haldeman, bless Norfolk, bless this area
Yes,
with
God.
our first responders. Keep
Yes.
them safe and help us as a church to be a lighthouse today.
Thank you, Jesus.
And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, why don't you be seated? I know time is getting on and your butts are probably pretty sore right now. I do have a few thoughts that I just want to share. Lasagna, I think, is ready. Maybe it needs more time to heat up, I don't know. But I do just want to share a few thoughts this morning as your pastor and as a pastor of the community. And somebody told me a long time ago, you're not the pastor of the church, you're the pastor in the community. And so be open to serving the community however you can. It's not essentially just your church. But I do want to just share a few thoughts with you. Number one, and you probably don't know this, but I always wanted to be a paramedic or a firefighter. And this was when little Robbie was running around, fire engine red hair, and more ADD than you could shake a stick at. And I just, the deal was, I watched too much TV. So if you are of my vintage, you will remember a show, I think it went from 1972 to 1977. The show was called Emergency. Can I get a witness? Okay, so there's a bunch of you in here just like, what is going on? You need to think 911 Lone Star, right? Just didn't have Rob Lowe as the main character, right? And anyways, this was my dream. And so I look back through the power of the internet. I actually found the introduction of this show. And so to tell you how times have changed, we talk about technology and all those things for the EMS crowd, for the fire crowd. Just check out the brilliance of the technology in this short clip. Love that. Did you see the cell phone that was like this big? Hello! Yeah, things haven't changed at all, have they? But here's the deal. When I was a kid, when I was 5 and 6, I just saw that show and I just resonated with it. I'm just like, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And so my mother bought me the helmet. You can buy them on eBay. Engine 51, Station 51. You know, we got a 4-line, whatever it was. I can't remember the call. But then they also sold the little set. And there was a set with a stethoscope in it. And there was like a little reflex checker, and there was some other stuff where you can maybe look in somebody's ear. And for about 6 months of time, man, I was going around like a little paramedic. And my dad gave me a fishing tackle box, and I had all my stuff in there. And I would jump down, okay, we got an emergency. And I would start checking people's pulses, and I would start looking in their ears and hitting them on the knee and all this kind of stuff, because I was just so impassioned about being a first responder. Fortunately, I got another call, because you probably wouldn't want me to be a first responder. I don't think I would be good at it at all, but here we are today, and this is my chosen calling. But here's the thing that I was resonating with as I was thinking about this. It's kind of innate in all of us, isn't it? If we go to the deepest steps, if we go back as far as we can, it really is innate in all of us. We want to help, right? If you think about children want to help. How can I help make daddy feel better? How can I help make mommy feel better? There's this empathy that children are born with, and it's built into their DNA, that somehow along the way maybe kind of wanes over the years, but you're built with it. And I really believe as a child, this was one of the things that was driving. But we love to see it, and we resonate with it. I have a mechanic who's in the area, and I'll tell you what, I'm not going to out him, because I don't think I should, but anyways, I was sitting in his waiting room getting snow tires and an oil change, and just kind of waiting around. And I was just sitting there waiting for my vehicle to be changed, and people were walking in. You could tell they were maybe a little under-resourced. You could tell they were maybe, maybe it had some challenges or whatever. And this guy who was running this automotive shop was up to here. Vehicles are coming and going, all this stuff. There's all of this busyness that's going on. And the guy came in and, oh, how much do I owe you? And he's like, oh, you don't owe me anything. Go ahead. Next guy comes in, oh, you don't owe me anything. Go ahead. And he was just releasing these guys. I'm like, how does he run this business? And I really think to his toes, he has a heart of gold. And he just wants to give back, and he just wants to do good things. And I think that is a quality that's innate in all of us. And see, this is the thing that we probably don't all understand, because we're in our own headspace a lot of the time. We have our own mind clatter, brain clatter going on. And if we could dial into this part of us, and we could recognize that the idea that we have life and death in our power, that created as, God created us, we have the power of life and death in our power. In fact, Solomon, the wisest person that ever lived, the Bible says that the tongue has the power of life and death. The tongue has the power of life and death, which means you can speak life or you can speak death. Literally, you have that power, and you're like, well, how is that possible? Well, I'll give you an example, and the first example is this. Think about a compliment that somebody you really respected gave you, or something that somebody said to you at a certain time when you were struggling with something or really needed some advice. And to this day, you can dial back and you can go, that changed my life. I can remember mentors saying things to me that I'm living on to this day. And probably you can too. That's the power of life in the tongue. And I can also remember, and so can you, because on the schoolyard or maybe at high school, somebody crushed you with one sentence and it has defined your life. The power of life and death is in our tongue. We have that power. We've received that power, and we also have that power. And I would actually even go further to say, it's not just the tongue or the words that we speak, it's in our hands. It's in our heart. It's in our attitude. When I'm thinking about EMS today, when I'm thinking about fire today, when I'm thinking about police, literally, you guys have life and death in your hands. When you're doing chest compressions, I've done some CPR courses, and my last year, I used to look around and go, is there a nurse in the building? Is there a firefighter in the building? Is there EMS in the building? Thank the Lord, because I won't have to do this. I don't want it to be on me that you chose me to do chest compressions on this person. Life and death is in the power of the tongue, but it's also in the power of it's in our hands. But we also all have that power, metaphorically. Vic, you're talking about just pulling up and just saying, hey, thanks a lot. And the person, of course, is going to be suspicious. You better make sure your sticker's up to date before you do that. But anyways, and please don't check my sticker on the way out of the thing. But you just to pull up and do that. What does it cost you to do that? Maybe 5 minutes a time, 3 minutes a time, whatever. But you have this power of life and death. And so really it landed me with just three simple thoughts, and I'll leave you with these. Got one killer story at the end, and then we're having lasagna. Here are my 3 thoughts today, mostly for our first responders, but essentially for everybody, even for the house of the Lord today. And the first thought that I had today as I was coming into First Responders Appreciation Day is that we can make a difference. That you can make a difference. And you're thinking, who, me? Yeah, you can make a difference. And I would even hazard to guess, or even step out and say that you have made a difference. You have already made a difference through your training, through your service, through all the things that you've done. You've already made a difference. And it kills me to think that on the staff there are people going, what's the use? Who cares? And I get it. It's probably just years and years of trauma. And it's like, I just keep emptying this pool of water and it just keeps getting filled back up again. So what's the point? The point is that you do make a difference. It does make a difference. What you do is valuable. What you do matters. What you do is helpful. What you do is honorable. It is important, and I want to say thank you, and I thank again Vic for giving a tribute to the first responders so well. It makes me think of the sentence that Jesus spoke, and he said, "Love is the greatest." We have it on the screen. Greater love is no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friend. This is essentially could almost be your mission statement, right? It could almost be, this is what we do. And when I thought about this, a number of different things came to mind. Not only was it Jesus speaking directly to the disciples on the night that he was betrayed and he was about to give the ultimate sacrifice of his life, he's saying, hey, this is what you guys should be about. To be ready to lay down your life for your friends. And in fact, as much as we talked about it being innate at the beginning, and really at the core of who we are, especially as children, it really is a tough task. It literally does take work. And that's why the sentence right before this says, "This is my command." There was the 10 Commandments, there was the laws of God, there was all these things. But in that moment, Jesus was instituting a brand new command, and the command was to love one another. And so when I think about this love, and again, Barry, you kind of alluded to this in your talk, but this is not a hippy-dippy love. This is not Whistling Dixie. This is not, unicorns and rainbows and bunnies. This is gut-level love. When it's the hardest, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because of love. This is a sacrificial love. There's nothing easy about loving this way. Nothing easy. But it is required, and it is a command. And I thought about this with Jesus, where he said this, but then he exemplified it. You have to do this on purpose. You have to do this on purpose. And the other part of it that I think is so tough is you have to do it blindly. And I don't really know what your experience is. You go to a house fire and you save somebody's house, or you save their car, or you save something else, or, maybe you're EMS and you save somebody's life. Maybe they're under cardiac arrest and you literally save their life. Do you ever hear from them again? Do you ever, do you drive away, you go home that night, and you go, hey, I just saved 2 people's lives today. And there's no fanfare, there's nobody shooting off rockets or giving you a card or a tip, it's just okay. I feel like I should get the purple medal. I feel like they should be just kind of throwing purple medals out your way, or whatever. You guys are doing life-saving work. And it's often done unnoticed, unseen, unthanked, just into the oblivion. It's tough. So, the second thing I want to talk about today is it takes a toll. And I do, honestly, Barry, thank you so much for being so honest. so candid with us today. I really believe that we need to hear that. We need to hear some of the realities. As grim as they are, we need to hear it because we need to understand that it takes a toll. I looked up some stats, and I'm so thankful as well that, Vic, you were here, because you can speak. You're right there. You're having the conversations. I can't speak. I'm a civilian. I can't really speak in like you spoke into. But some of the PTSD rates, 30% higher. In some cases, 40% higher than the general population. But it's not just that. Some of the things that I heard about, and you talked about, them bringing stuff home and just being tricky at home. Lack of sleep, constant stress, physical and psychological toll, and unresolved trauma. It takes a toll. And in the church, if you've ever done anything, if you've kind of gone out of your way to support somebody or help somebody or love somebody, and then you kind of you're moaning to your friends going, I didn't even get so much as a thank you. I made them that casserole that time or whatever, right? And don't we get like that sometimes? It's like, well, how dare they? I really went out of my way and they really didn't do anything to thank me. And probably the lowest toll that can ever take, but you guys are superheroes. You're heroes, but you're not superhuman. The toll is real. The toll is real. And what you carry is heavy. Experiences, memories, work environments, all of that stuff. You're trying to help somebody and you're experiencing flack from the outside. It's tough. And then I can't help but think, for me, I'm not a counselor. My wife is the counselor in our family, and she gets paid to do it. She does a great job. And sometimes she comes home and says, I had 5 sessions today. I'm like, 5 sessions? How do you do that? 6 sessions. I'm like, if I do 1 session, I'm under my desk with my thumb in my mouth for the rest of the day. But I'm thinking about firefighters, EMS. It's like, as soon as that police, as soon as you're done 1 call, it's like, okay, well now I get to go to Bermuda, I get to put my feet up, I get to relax and unwind. No, then there's another call. And I just cannot even empathize or even understand what the toll must be, but I do get that it takes a toll. So you make a difference, it takes a toll, and it takes perseverance. So, there are realities. There are realities in what you're going through. There are realities in some of the helps and things that are available. There are some strategies that you can use, but it's just going to take perseverance. And I don't want to dumb this down, but it's like anything in life takes perseverance. If you're going to accomplish anything, if you're going to accomplish any goal, whether it's in business or whether it's in the church or your faith or whether it's in your job or whether it's EMS, fire, or police, it takes perseverance. It takes perseverance. And I love the verse in Galatians 6:9. It says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And we use that for the church, but I think this applies just straight across the board. So the last church that I was the pastor at, I was a assistant pastor, and my senior pastor was a bit of a mentor to me. I had gone through a hard time, and he kind of pulled me aside and was trying to kind of get me back on my feet again. And I had been working for him full-time for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I had been working at part-time a little bit, and then he brought me on full-time. And our church was in the process of doing a massive expansion, a multi-million-dollar expansion. And so we had a work day set up, and I think it was a May day. It might have been, midway through May. So he gave me the job of heading up the work bee. Right? We've all been parts of work bees. And you come and you're kind of getting it. We had to get everything ready for this multi-million-dollar expansion. So we were clearing out this area because there was going to be a parking lot, and then the parking lot was going to actually form the foundation of the new facility. And so we were building on to where we were. And so he says, I'm going away for the weekend, but I want you to take care of this. And I said, okay, no problem. What are we doing? We're picking up some shrubs and we're going to clean this up and clean that up and throw that in the dumpster. And we had a fire going for a couple weeks, and there was a portable on site, and that was going to be removed. And we were taking some of the things from the portable, and we had this little tiny fire, this little campfire. All week long, we had a burn pile, and we were burning stuff. And so we're just getting everything ready so that when the contractors came, that everything would be good to go. And anyways, the guys came, and as you would think, as soon as guys get together and there's machines involved and there's cleanup involved and there's fire involved, things get crazy. Am I right? Thank you, Luke, for that laugh. It just can get crazy because guys get ahead of themselves, some testosterone. Oh yeah, you can lift that. Well, watch this. You can throw it that far, watch this, right? And so there's a little bit of this thing happening. Now, in the process of time, there was this little tiny garden shed. Well, it was probably like 5 feet or 6 feet across by about 10 feet long. And it was just there because they used to have a community garden. And so all along the morning, they kept saying, Pastor Rob, what are we going to do with this garden shed? I'm like, I'm not really sure yet. Like, is there a spot that we can tuck it? Like, can we get it out of the way? And they're like, well, why don't we just burn it? Like, if we just burnt it, it would be gone. And I'm like, well, I'm new here. I don't like, how long has this been here? Who belongs to this? Like, what is even in it, and so forth. Anyways, we had the conversation but we never made a decision. And then there was the one moment that I'll never forget. One guy that was at the Work Bee owns a contracting company, and he had one of those big, huge loaders. It's like a forklift, but it's like on steroids. Anyways, I see him come around the corner of the church, and he has the garden shed on the forks. And he's got this grin across his face saying, I am putting this shed on our burn pile. And of course, at that moment, we're all like, yeah! Like we're just loving life, just having a blast. This is going to be the best thing ever. So anyways, and then what was funny was there was a board member there who was a fire chief in North York. And he was there with me. And so I'm like, you think this is a good idea? Anyways, he's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. It'll go up fast. It'll go up fast. It's all chipboard. It'll go up fast. Anyways, yes, you are feeling the tension. And I'm standing there like, new guy, like, what's going on? Anyways, I was to come to find out that this was the pastor's personal shed, that he built it himself. Anyways, he just kept on rolling, and then I see the forks just lower into the fire, and he pulls back, and the thing starts coming around the sides. Probably like you're used to in training. You're just like, okay, this is the way fire operates. We're like, cool. So we get the phones out, selfie. Oh, this is great. Oh, this is going to be over so quick. Hurry up. It's going to be over fast. So we take a group shot in front of this, burgeoning fire. And all of a sudden somebody says, did anybody check what's in there? I didn't check. Did you check? Guys, right? This is guys. Like, women, this is the way guys operate. What's in there? I'm not really sure. Was there a wheelbarrow in there? Oh, if there's a wheelbarrow, then that means there's a tire. There's a tire in there, so this tire is going to burn. And the one person, then somebody comes up, oh, were you wondering about this? Yeah, there was a whole bunch of garden tools, which I found out were the pastor's personal garden tools, and some roofing tar paper. So by now the fire is halfway up the building. It is a serious fire. Like, this is not a campfire. This is like a building on fire, a small building on fire. And all of a sudden the tire caught and the tar paper caught. And after the flames rose to about 30 feet in the air, the smoke was as black as you can think of, and it was all the way up. Our road was busy, kind of like this road. Our road was busy, and traffic was stopped, and I couldn't see the people. All I could see was their silhouette, and everybody was like this. And I'm like, oh snap, am I about to lose my job? 2 weeks in, I'm gonna lose my job. And I mean, it is cooking. Like, this thing, we are all like back, and first we were taking selfies, and now we're like, we better run. Like, this, what else is in there? Are there aerosol cans in there? Did anybody check is there propane? So all of a sudden now it went from like taking selfies, having fun, to like, this could be serious. Oh man. Anyways, fire department showed up. Thank you guys. And the fire chief disappeared. Completely. I thought, well, if anybody can advocate for this, it should be you. Gone, nowhere to be seen. And they left the new guy in charge of dealing with the fire department. And the guys are like, what were you thinking? And I'm like, we weren't thinking. That's the thing. And there was a bunch of us, and none of us were thinking. And so this happened. And he says, you can do a 3-foot fire, and we won't bug you. Like if you do something that's inside of 3 feet and you got some rocks around and stuff, campfire, I'm like, well, it was kind of, he's like, no, that was not 3 feet. You know, and the smoke is still kind of billowing out of the thing. Anyways, my pastor was devastated that his little garden shed went up in about 5 minutes flat, that all of his garden tools were gone, including his wheelbarrow, that the tar paper was gone, that we killed the ozone layer a little bit. It was terrible. And I thought, like, he's going to come back from holiday and go, he's going to tear a strip off me. He is going to actually just light me up and just give me all kinds of grief. And anyways, I walked in. I did the service on the Sunday and had the Monday off, and then walked in on Tuesday morning. And I walked in, I didn't see him, opened my office door, and there is a big red bag, a gift bag on my desk. And I'm like, this is really weird. And of course, that was a Saturday, so I'm like, it's a little bit in the past. I wasn't thinking about it. I was a little nervous about how this was all going to go down when my pastor confronted me about burning his shed down. And I look in the box, and there's a fire extinguisher. Or I look in the bag, and there's a fire extinguisher in the bag. And I'm like, this guy has a sense of humor. What is going on here? And I open up a card that says, thank you for your help. I believe in your leadership. There are great days ahead. And I thought of all of the ways that he could have handled that situation, of just the trouble that I did get into, because we got a big bill from the fire department. We had no shed left. I mean, we took care of it. He wanted it taken care of, so it was taken care of. The point that I want to take is this, that sometimes in our lives we feel like all is lost, right? We feel like all is lost. We feel like it's just not working, that I've made too many mistakes, that I'm not making a difference enough, that, you know, it's just not, everything's been destroyed. Everything feels destroyed. And I just want to echo those sentiments that he gave, that I believe in your leadership. I believe in what you do and the way you do it and all those things. It has value, and I believe there are great days ahead. As you continue to go out and make a difference, you know, dealing with the toll that it takes on you and putting all the perseverance in, there are great days ahead. There are great days ahead. The last thing I want to say is this, is that first responder, I don't know if you're a believer, if you believe in God or any of those things, it's not really the point. The one thing that I would love to share with you as a pastor and a spiritual leader is that God loves you. Is that God loves you. You know, we know the Bible, and you probably know the verse if you spend any time in church or Sunday school or whatever, that for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. Right? That whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. And so if you feel like there's no hope, if you feel like there's nothing going on, there's just this, you know, this nihilistic kind of emptiness in the universe, it's all blackness and it all just goes to nothing. I really just want to let you know, and maybe this is a brand new idea for you, but that God loves you. God loves you. So let me pray, and then I have a few announcements, and then our morning will be finished. Father, we